If we were going to, we ask the question, what makes a healthy person, is a very systems question. What are the factors that lead a person to be healthy or unhealthy? The simple view is to say, buy enough of these vitamin pills. What's an alternative view? It's a good question. You're going to have to answer this, then we'll take a break. In fact, it's a very good question. I'll take the question again. This is what I should have put on the exam. Some people would lead you to believe that taking a tablet every day will make you healthy. There is a question on the exam which talks about what would Socrates do about this. All right? So we need to apply this stuff now. What would Socrates say to this? I am saying to this man here, I haven't got a pill here. If you take this every day, you will be healthy. Being healthy will result from you taking this vitamin tablet. What's the Socratic response to that, team? What's in the tablet? Yeah. What's in the tablet? All right. So do analysis. What's the tablet? We'll say it's vitamin C used to be the magic pill. Back in the 70s, vitamin C was the magic pill. Now it's a bit more complex than that. So we'll say A, B, and C. All right. So here's vitamin A, B, and C. Is the magic thing it's going to make you healthy? There's a big question you need to ask for you to have shown me that you've learnt one thing this semester. What's the big question? First lecture. What's that? Credibility. What's the credibility of the speaker? Yeah, you're going to get... If you take this pill, you will be healthy. What's the big question? No? What did you say? Right, so there we go. One person out of 200, that's fine. We only need one. What do you mean by healthy? Because, of course, the people selling the pill are trying to intimate that all you need to be healthy is to have a pill, vitamin, and that will be good for the engine of your body. A lot of people are unhealthy not because they are not taking vitamin tablets, but because of other reasons. They've just been divorced, they've lost their job, they don't know what they're doing. So we're talking about physical, the pill and physical health, the pill and mental or spiritual or psychological health. And so the key question is, what do you mean by healthy? See, you ask if you don't ask the question, then you're sucked into believing that maybe it's true. He says, and maybe he's dressed in as a doctor, he says this is going to be good, maybe that's true. The intelligent person asks that question. That is an exam question. What would Socrates do when faced with a statement, something, all migrants should be integrated? What do you mean? What do you mean by this? What do you mean by that? To what extent are you covering it? You see, so the first thing is when people are trying to sell you an idea, you don't buy or not buy, you ask them the underlying concept. What do you mean? What do you mean by healthy? What's in the pill? What's the credibility? So you're on the questions. That's what the critical thinker is always doing. Of course, the reason why the sales of vitamin tablets is through the roof is because there is, of course, some evidence to say it's good. But of course, because people often know that they're not eating the best, and so it's a sort of a compensation. I might drink too much, I might eat too much, I might take too much drugs, but as long as I have this pill, I'll live forever. See? So that's this underlying question. So the systems view, when you look at this question, is what does it mean to be healthy, is not simply a healthy stomach or a healthy lungs or a healthy head, but indeed a healthy person is a more complex system, which you might argue is not simply the person and their body and their mind, but also the relationships that they have with other people. Hence, this question is, does the pill fix the relationships? Does the pill fix the things that you're doing? Let's take a break for 10 minutes. 6 o'clock. Hi.
The thing which you're making us understand, the critical thinking.
Yeah?
I mean, where this concept can be used as an MBA graduate in studies? I mean, in studies and even in like working.
Say that again?
I mean, as a student,
Right.
where can we use the concept of critical thinking in our work or studies?
We can use it. All right, so that is a good question. I will talk about that after the break. But the short answer is, if you say you start a business, you're going to be faced with many people trying to sell you stuff. You're going to have to make strategic choices about your business. You're going to be working within a system of suppliers, government, consumers, industry groups. And so if you are a critical thinker, you will make better decisions.
Okay, so
If you're not, yeah, so it's a fair point, because one of the things that, somebody in the feedback last year said it's supposed to be about business and we didn't talk about business very much. But, so the way I see it, it's simply implied that the process of decision making is, for example, you've got a business, someone comes to you and says, I want to sell you a HR package, cost you $1 million. Now I know that in the 1990s, a lot of big companies were buying those packages after going out to lunch with an IT guy and say, so people would go out for lunch, and I'd say, buy this HR package and your company. Now, of course, they'd implement the package, install the package, and work. I mean, the package worked, but didn't suit the organisation. Nobody knew how to do it. They didn't know the data. Didn't make any sense.
okay.
You see? And that's it. So that's a good point which I'll make, because there's a couple of slides here which I'll talk about, but that's it. So the systems, you see, without the systems view, you're vulnerable to a salesman saying this is going to solve your problems. With the systems view, and I've photocopied some sheets here, so I'll give them out and use it for something entirely what's not. Someone comes and says, I'm going to sell you this magic box. Alright, magic box. Cost you a few dollars, sell it. You ask the question, why? What would help me? How? What? But Kipling. Why, what, when, where, how, how? See? Crisis maxim. Is it relevant? See? So you're asking, how does this fit into my system here? Your company, whatever industry. So you're into metals. Like manufacturing. How does this fit into there? And of course, a computer system is obviously a system.
But isn't the critical thinking a normal human behavior to doubt about the thing you're going to buy?
normal critical. I mean, aren't
Like-
most people critical
like
anyway?
The question that you gave me there. Obviously, if I'll be spending some money, wouldn't I be thinking about whether I'm spending it for right or wrong?
That seems like an obvious thing.
Yeah, that's an obvious.
That is obvious, but often people don't do what's obvious.
Okay.
Often in business, they don't do what is obvious.
Okay.
And in fact, the whole Royal Commission, which you want to have a look at, they were doing things which were illegal.
Okay.
Why were people doing things that were illegal in a business?
In that concept, the critical thinking applies. Because if you are going by illegal way, then obviously you have to apply some critical thinking to know the output of the thing, of that thing towards your business. Then that concept comes in critical thinking.
Yeah, but there are so many cases of companies which have been done things which are criminal simply because they were quick money.
No, I know that, sir, because I worked as a business consultant in India.
Right, and so you saw
my
it.
head used to
Flip out.
follow, yeah.
Right, oh, you
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I would rather say that unethical ways to get the projects towards them.
Right, that's right. So there is the critical thinker. The critical thinker uses a range of tools to analyse problems.
Okay.
And so if it's analysed within a system's view, then you're more likely to come up with a solution which sticks.
Okay.
Right? That makes sense?
Yeah, yeah.
But the problem is that people are so used to a short-term, a short-term solution. So that's what you're fighting against. In some ways, I'm saying non-critical thinkers are lazy because they want a quick answer. Sometimes they're greedy because they want a money-fast answer. You see? But of course, a lot of people with money fast, they end up in jail. Right? I mean, of course, no doubt you saw many people who were doing the money fast cheating and they were living quite well. Mercedes-Benz and all this. Absolutely. No, I gave it a sheet of paper because I thought it might be something from the textbook because I think that if I said the most important sentence from the course is that everything's more complex, that the simplest tool, the most effective structural tool was Dilt's logical levels. Then the most effective, the easiest trick, you might say, or way of thinking, that's okay, that's okay, just leave there. The easiest trick to implement to make yourself a much more powerful person, for those of you that want to be a more powerful person, is the use of metaphor. For example, so that's why I gave you this sheet of paper, all right? So you can read it, I'll talk about it briefly at the end of the class if I've got time for it. But in fact, the reason why I gave it to you now is because I want you to have a sheet of paper on your table and I want you to write a couple of things. The first one is I want you to write a metaphor for yourself. What is a metaphor for you as a person? Piece of paper, I mean, you've got a computer, write on the computer. What's a metaphor for yourself? Now, if you can't think of one, that's sad, right? That's a very sad thing. It's sad and revealing, but of course, hopefully there'll be at least one person in the class that'll be able to think of a metaphor for a person, for themselves. If you can think of a metaphor for yourself, then you can start to think of a metaphor for everything else. And once you do that, then it's a bit like riding a bike. Once you can do it, then you will be able to use it. The question during the break was, how has critical thinking got to do with business? What's this process got to do with business? And so my answer is that, of course, when you're in business, there's all sorts of decisions you've got to make. Should you buy this? Should you choose this strategy? Should you get into partnership with somebody? Should you set up in another country? Should you change a new technology? Should you buy a new computer system? Each of those decisions are critical for the success of your business, obviously. They are obviously value for money. What you're looking for is return on investment. Anyone who's done any basic accounting knows return on investment is the central concept. But if you look at the case studies of many businesses, you'll see that people in business make very uncritical decisions. Someone comes and sells them a computer system, a HR system I know a bit about, cost you $1 million. The salesman says, look, this is a perfect system, it'll fit your business. It's correct that a computer system is a system. Your business is a system. Whether those systems are compatible, of course, is the big question mark. And of course, like all salesmen, they will come and they will tell you this can do everything you need so that your people will be happy and you'll be able to make more money and your life will be simpler. So they do the sales tricks, Brookfield's tricks, you see. They use all the stuff and people buy them. And then they have to try to implement the systems and they realise that their staff hasn't got the skills, that the computer software power is not appropriate, that it's not suitable for their industry or for their company or for that the amount of time it's going to take is too long. And so a critical thinker will of course think of the problem in a much broader perspective. That's what it is. They will look at it from a systems point of view. This question that I'm asking you, a metaphor for yourself, is an interesting one because the way in which you see yourself is the initial stage of this thing of critical thinking, you know. Because I've been saying, look, critical thinking is trying to orientate where you are to know where you're going to be. But of course the step before that, which I haven't spoken about, is who are you? Of course some people see themselves as being part of a family. You see, who am I? I'm part of a big part of family, as most people are. And for 25 years of my life, I saw myself as being part of a family. Sorry? You know, when people say, who are you? I'd say, I'm part of a family. Then, of course, you can think of... So you see that my identity was tied with a system that I was part of. The metaphor is simply the language of systems that we use. The metaphor is simply the language of systems that we use. And if you have a read of this, you'll see that these primary metaphors may be the structure of thought. It's the literary equivalent of what the brain guy was talking about last week. You know, he's looking into the brain, trying to find out where the thought is. This is a literary equivalent, saying, look, maybe when we learn, we're learning things in terms of a metaphor. Right? Everything's more complex, so we've got to learn it in simple ways. Love is warmth, is a simple metaphor. Love is warmth. So if you want to make somebody love you give them a night, turn the heater up. Love is warmth. Tall is important. That's why the religious people sit on a big seat, they've got a big hat, they've got big clothes. The crown extends their height, so even a little person looks big. See these basic metaphors. And of course, if this guy's correct, then it's not surprising that people who are very effective in leading others understand that and use it naturally. And so when it comes to describing their business, they don't describe it in analytic terms, they talk about it in metaphoric terms. In metaphoric terms. We'll see, did anybody come up with a metaphor for themselves? Metaphor for themselves? Did you come up with it? Well, there's 200 people in this room. Of course, I'm exaggerating, but don't tell me that. By the end of the doors will be locked. Nobody's going out until we've got one metaphor for a person. Metaphor. I better ask a couple. Have you got a metaphor for yourself? No, metaphor. Sure, okay. Let's have a look at some metaphors. Examples of a system as an organisation. A system is a team. It's the interaction effect. The system is a city. Public transport system, obviously. You know, if one tram stops, then the whole tram network is stuffed up. If somebody is blocked in the tunnel on going home, then my trip home is going to be much longer. Education. A human being is a system. Of course, we are unaware of the system until something breaks down. You talk to old people, and they'll tell you about, their something valve doesn't work. You didn't even know that you had a valve. But because it doesn't work, they can't eat properly, and therefore they can't sleep, and therefore, you see, you know, once you've broken your finger, you start to work out over the next couple of days how many things you do involve your finger. And even when you use your other hand, you can feel the pressure on your finger. See? So the body is the simplest system that we understand, and so the metaphor for the body is a useful one. Of course, my body is a machine can be a sort of a rocky metaphor. Okay, my body is a machine. Is it a good metaphor? No. Is it useful? Is it a useful metaphor? Sounds good, all right, sounds good. Of course, if you've got no other metaphor, it's better than everything else. Of course, it's very mechanistic. Shovel in petrol, and then I can do some running. See, it's a very simple metaphor. It's not, you won't say it's great, but it's better than everybody else's. Somebody will think of a metaphor. Have you got a metaphor for a person? Metaphor for a person. See, we've got the smartest brains in the whole of Victoria, all in this room here. Before the hour, we will squeeze one metaphor out of them. A flock of birds, or the Murray-Darling Basin. Of course, looking at things by reverse is an easy way. A brick is not a system. Of course, a brick wall is a system. You got all these bricks together and all the cement and the design, but the brick itself is just something isolated. Would you call this chair a system? See, that's good. Going back to the man who was asking me questions, of course, any question which is a bit hard starts to be something interesting. Is this chair a system? No. All right, see, at least he's got an answer. That's what I want. An answer. We've got an intelligent person up there. There's life in the back row. Can anyone give a contrary version that the chair might be a system? What's that? For the person sitting on it might be a... Of course, there's parts that move together. You could also say that it's not by chance that this is green and plastic and the same height. So one way is saying the chair within itself is a system. When you get off it, it goes to sleep. When you sit down on it, it wakes up and it does its job. System. It's part of a broader system. And that's part of a broader system, which is the room. It's not here by chance. This chair wasn't a chair salesman just didn't say, look, university, you need this chair. Let's put it here. It was part of a broad design. And of course, its function for this particular room is very specific. So you could say within itself it's a system. It's part of a broader system of chairs. It's part of a broader system of a lecture theatre. See, it's not by chance that it's elevated, facing that way. So that's the question. Of course, if this chair was chucked out on Burwood Highway, you'd say, I'd be inclined to agree with you. No, it's just a piece of junk. Of course, it would be if it caused an accident, it would be part of a system, the traffic system. See? So we're starting to look at in philosophy they say no man or woman is an island. The equivalent in systems view is that nothing is unconnected to everything else. See, nothing is unconnected. Of course, this is a very simple system. One of the things about the system, you know that it's a system. When you look at it, it all works. When it's broken, you need special skills to fix it. Well, we're not up to hands up, but you can imagine if at your place the plumbing doesn't work. Say that, for example, one of those things is leaking and the kitchen is smelling because of all the water there. Are you able to fix that? No. All right, that's it. Systems are often, they require certain skills. When it's all working, it looks beautiful. When it's not working, people often try to do the wrong thing. People often do things which make it worse. Of course, going back to the man who was asking me questions about how is this subject related to business, the perfect metaphor is the organisation structure itself and this sink. Many businesses operate and they have a problem. When they start having a problem, the people running them don't know what they should do. They're not the plumber, to extend the metaphor. And so they think, let's pay people more. Let's give them incentivisation. That will make the company go better. Of course, what the bank's found is that you give people incentives, it makes them do things which sell more stuff, even if they're criminally, they're wrong. Right? It's like stealing. One of the things that the bank was doing, the Commonwealth Bank, you know what the Commonwealth Bank is? They were stealing from dead people. So, the person here, they're dead, obviously. And the bank was still charging them money for services that obviously they weren't getting because they were dead. You see, so why the system's view is the person doing it must be a bad person, like a criminal. Send them to jail. The system's view will be saying, how could you create such a system that a person and his boss and his boss and his boss all thought that this was a good idea, and that when they found out about it, they didn't do anything about it? That's where's the man who asked me the questions before? Got the answer, he's gone. That's when this stuff starts to be interesting. That it's the system's view that starts to say, look, this is not an easy problem to change. You can't use the remote control. How could it be? What can you do? You can't simply grab one person, send them off to jail and say, that's it, the system has been fixed. It's a bit like when, if this is your sink and it's leaking, you put a cupboard in front of it and so you can't see it anymore and the system is still leaking. That's what the systems understanding is. Once you understand that, then you come back to what Jeff Lichtman said yesterday, which was, last week, everything's more complex than we think it is. You see? So you go and try to fix your, no doubt many of you people will either own your own companies or be managing directors or CEOs of companies. Of course, I don't have to be a genius to guess that at various times between now and when you give up the job, there's going to be big problems. Those problems are rarely going to be the case of the chair needs to get fixed by someone and that solves the problem. They're generally systems problems. People are unhappy, people are doing the wrong thing, people are not being honest, they're not selling enough stuff or making enough stuff. It will be a systems problem that is the reason for what's happening. And so the only way that you as the leader of the company can do anything about it is to first understand what the system is. And so that's why you get the back of this paper and you draw a diagram. So, okay, here is the problem, what are the causes of it? What are the elements of it? Of course, there's another very complex system. You get people who are heart specialists. They spend their whole career just focused on that one organ because it's a very complex system. Of course, those of us with a healthy heart, you just imagine that it works and doesn't go, there's no problem. Of course, people who've got a hole in their heart or they've got some problem with the rhythm of the heart, then they find out how complex the system is. And on it goes. Of course, one of the great philosophical questions is, why did the Titanic sink? The simple answer is... Because of what?
Not because of Leonardo DiCaprio.
It was because of what Leonardo DiCaprio was doing on the boat. Of course, the simple answer is that it hit the iceberg. That's a simple answer. But the boat was a system. What were the system? So here's the boat. What were other parts of the system which impacted on the crash? What are the systems which a boat is made out of? What are the systems? What are the systems? Go on. Oh yeah. What's that? Coal. Okay, so a simple one is coal. It is a coal-fired ship. And so one of the things about coal is that it's not like a petrol, you can just go on and off. You're steaming it up, or you slow it down, but it takes a long time. So the speed of the ship is determined by the coal. And so that if the ship is running into this iceberg, you can't put the brakes on like in a car. So maybe the reason is that it was coal-fired. Of course, the reason why it's such an interesting thing, it was because when they made it, they said that it was unsinkable. It was designed in a way that was unsinkable. Of course, the word that we use to explain that problem is hubris. Anybody who thinks that what they're doing is the best in the world, that nothing can go wrong because you're the smartest person in the world, you've got an inflated sense of yourself, and so you're a little bit towards crazy. Of course, so when you analyse the Titanic, you can say the design of the ship was actually flawed. See, there's four funnels on it. Only 3 of them were actually used. One of them was there for decoration. But the design problem with it was that there were the airlocks were not separated as effectively as they could have been. The speed of the ship, so it was going too fast, so they couldn't slow it down. The quality of the rivets, when they were building it, they could have had high quality rivets. They chose cheaper ones, which meant that when it was under pressure by hitting an iceberg, they ripped like paper. The impatience of the captain, it was his last voyage. He wanted to show that it was the fastest the ship. So there was, you might say, ego or pressure. And so despite warnings similar to what the film says, he says, no, we can do it. Right? The diet of the sailors. The sailors at the time had a poor diet. They weren't taking vitamin E tablets, and many of them weren't eating vegetables. Vegetables have got to do with the system of your eyes. And so if you've got poor eyesight, then you can't see icebergs from a long way away. So it could be argued that the Titanic went down because the sailors weren't eating vegetables, or enough vegetables. The weather itself, of course, was a factor. There's the fogs there. The icebergs, of course, which is what everybody wants. And of course, you can spend the next 20 years of your life looking up the story of why the Titanic sank, because people got an opinion of it. From a systems point of view, you would simply say that there was a whole lot of systems which were feeding into it not being a safe boat to be in. What's that?
The ship wasn't prepared.
The ship wasn't... Right, so there was a whole range of reasons. Of course, you could see it, if you turn into Channel 73 or whatever it is, Air Crash Disaster, there's a TV show, or you look at the news and every so often a plane goes down, the question is, why did it fail? And the answer is always, it's a complex set of problems, a complex set of systems which are interacting, and the organisation, whoever was owning it, wasn't managing them all. So, in a sense, like the DILTS framework, you can use the systems point of view from looking at yourself within a series of systems. You're part of a micro system, which is also part of a macro system, or an exosystem, or a chronosystem. Let's have a look at them. So we live within a microsystem, the school, family, our peers, the people we know, what we call the first circle. The mesosystem is the workplace and neighbourhood, the people you know but you don't know. The exosystem is the systems which support us, education, government. Whether you like it or not, our lives are dependent on those. The macro system, of course, is these underlying beliefs and values, highly questionable. They're the thing which are obviously different when you move from country to country, but obviously within a country they're highly variable. So this is the contested territory over which so many arguments are made. And this question about integration of migrants to Australia, worth writing down as a claim, are so contested. And then of course there's the chronosystem, which is we live in a time and a place. So that if this man here was the same person but he was living in 1860, his life would be different. Not because his genetic structure would be different, simply because of the world around him. And so each of, when you ask this question, who am I? It is a very complex thing, you see. I am myself. I know who I am. But if we say, hang on, Michael, if you were brought up in Sydney, you'd be quite a different person. You'd speak differently. You'd dress differently. You probably would have gone to a different school. You'd meet different people. Therefore, that would change you. If you were brought up in India or in China or in Pakistan, then that would change you. So this question of who am I is quite an open, complex question. Not much wonder some people at about 40 get confused and they ask this question, who am I? And the answer is, I don't know anymore. See? I don't know anymore. That's why it's easy in the Garden of Eden to say, well, I know who I am because of my mum and my dad, I'm part of the family. So the critical thinker is always asking this question. And it is, that, in a sense, that is the big, deep philosophical question. Of course, for the business people, it's the question that all businesses face. Who am I? What is our mission? What is our vision? What are the values and beliefs that we have? Of course, it's a creative act to be able to define those. Well, it's very creative. I've worked with companies to try to identify it. They've got a business that's been running for 10 years, and so what's your mission? So, I don't know, you see, it's quite a difficult thing to conceptualise and to shape. Of course, there's a friend of mine who I work with. I'm the president of an organisation, he's the vice president. He thinks all this is a load of nonsense, management stuff. My opinion on it is that it is the vital essence of an organisation. That if the organisation doesn't know who it is, what it's trying to do, then it's going to be wasting a lot of energy. And so the language and the words and the metaphors that you use are going to be critical to you if you've got a group of 4 people. They're going to be much more critical if you've got 10 people. And of course, once you get 1,000 people in your organisation, that is absolutely essential for the organisation to be able to be on the same wavelength or be on the same page, whatever metaphor you want to use for an organisation to work together. So the business application of critical thinking is direct in terms of the decisions that an organisation is making every day of the week. Not for profit, same thing. People want to save the world. What do you mean? What do you mean? I want to be a greenie. What do you mean? I'm a conservationist. What are you going to do? Sort of sit down there and tell everybody, don't waste the environment. So what do you want to do? What's the question? So that's it. Of course, nested into interdependent systems, of course, business, society and the environment are directly connected. This is something that was not widely acknowledged up until really the 80s, I'd say. It wasn't recognised. Of course, there's a few instances where it becomes the fact that, so if I use these people as a metaphor, here is a business. He's in the business of mining. BHP, we'll call him. He wants to mine, and so he goes to a place called New Guinea, 1985. They find a mine, and all they do is go and get the minerals, get out, make money. That's what they did. Type it in, BHP Octedi, as an O-K-T-E-D-I. Now, from a business point of view, pure business point of view, all you got to do is go, find the minerals, get them out, sell them, make money. What happened? You tell me what happened. This is in the 1980s. The greenie stuff wasn't around. What potentially could happen if we were looking at it from a systems point of view? So a non-systems point of view, of course the business, BHP, the biggest company in Australia, is a system, obviously. There's a boss and a mission and lots of people and engineers and all this. From a non-systems point of view, mining is just get stuff, take it, sell it. What's the systems point of view? Okay, so one of them is the economic factors. So if the metal that they want to get out of New Guinea is not worth anything, the market drops, they leave. So there you go, there's a financial system. If we had a whiteboard, we'd do this. BHP, New Guinea, financial system. What's the other system? You have to tell me the answer to this because you're the people of the future. What was the other system? Just the state environment, that's right. The Octedi was a river. Octedi was a river. BHP flew I met a guy engineer, that's why I know the story so well. I remember a guy who's about 24, is an engineer, he was flying up to this thing. I'd never heard of it before. Octedi, he was going up there. And so the Octedi, I think it's the Octedi River, they go in there and they dig the ground up. What was the negative effect of digging the ground up beside a river? That landslide, they poisoned all the fish. And the river, up until that point, was the economy for all of the people who lived on the river. So here's the start of the river, all the way down to wherever it goes to. There are people, villages who are living, and the river is their source of income. It's a source of labour, it's a source of trade. BHP comes in and they made, let's say, $2 billion. took it out. In the process, they destroyed the river. They destroyed, the river being destroyed meant that these people could either drink dirty water and eat dead fish or go hungry. Now, it only took them a couple of years to extract the waste, to extract the metal. How long do you reckon it would take to fix up a river? What's that? Decades, that's correct. Decades. And if you search now, you'll find out that they're not all that happy. One of the big economic questions is, which you see, this is, if you're a company and you go in and you take out $10 million worth of stuff and you make a profit of $8 million on that, you say that's a win. If you destroy an ecosystem and the economic cost of that is $20 million, then what you've done is not any different to what the Commonwealth Bank and the AMP have done, which is to steal from people. You see, you didn't create any value. You saw an environment. You thought you saw stuff which was a metal. In fact, what you didn't see and you weren't aware of was that there was an ecosystem, which was not just a greeny thing, but it was a whole social ecosystem and an economic ecosystem. And what they did is stuffed it up. So what's critical thinking got to do with business? Every decision you make has a big impact on not only your business, but the people you interact with and the environment. Of course, there's no shortage of cases of this. You can find one of the speech next week. I'll show you a couple of speeches that students have done. One of the speeches, which was very moving for me when it was done, I've listened to it a number of times, was of a disaster in Vietnam only 2 or 3 years ago. The story is exactly the same. Different place, company takes metals, makes a waste, pollution, creates a disaster. People eat poisonous fish, they die. Critical thinking requires people to think beyond the moment. So that the chronosphere, which was on the previous slide, I think, people who have got critical thinking abilities need to be able to think beyond 2018 and think in terms of this decision and 2020 or 2030. And the people who are the real smart people think 2040. The reason why I always use Mahatma Gandhi as being a smart person is because when he had his idea of changing India or freeing India, it was in 1918. It didn't happen until 1946, which by my calculation is 28 years. See, so the critical thinker is not just a smart person who can solve a problem, but it's a smart person who can look at a problem within a system which isn't within a system. And so your question is the boundaries of systems. The answer, of course, is there isn't any boundaries. The problem for you is that when you look at a problem, you often have to say, look, you say if I'm going to try to understand the universe, I'll just say it's all complicated, but at least I'm going to try and understand the Earth. Right? You see? So I will put limits around what I'm trying to understand, knowing full well that this is part of a system which is part of a system which is part of a bigger system. So it means that you always end up like that Jeff Lichtman guy, always, even though you think you understand all of this, you will be humble. Because you say, I've spent the last 10 years understanding this part of this part of this part of this system. Go on. Go on, put it on the microphone. Good question, you see.
So,
put it right there. That's it.
So, the example which you gave on the mining thing,
yep.
And you calculated it with the money, this money which was lost.
Right.
You compare it by that.
can't we think it of in another sense, like how many generations lost their livelihoods and all?
Right. So this is, of course, this is the critical thinker is always looking beyond the answers that you're given. When I was driving over here, I was listening to a talk, Money Matters, and they were saying one of the problems is that GDP was a concept which was developed in the 1930s. And the guy who developed it, I can't remember his name, it's Cusius or something like this, he wanted some things in GDP and some things out of it. At the time, the government of America was trying to show that it was becoming stronger post First World War, and so what it wanted to do is to measure everything that was done. So again, if you can imagine that I've got a whiteboard in here, that the production which we understand, you know, like building cars, building services, building factories and selling stuff is all part of GDP. He didn't want to put in the building nuclear weapons because he says, what's building nuclear weapons? How's this making life better for us? See? So he was really on the point that you're making. Unfortunately, the concept was taken over not by the guy who invented it, by politicians. And they wanted to inflate the number as big as possible, and so they counted all these things. So the more nuclear weapons that Australia has, the bigger our GDP is. And so Donald Trump's been, you know, he just put in the budget, increased it by 17%. On paper, if you believe GDP, that sounds like the GDP, the economy of America is increasing. And of course, if you were a smart person, one of the best places to put your money is in war. Because you can be guaranteed that politicians will always think of war as being a great thing. Of course, some of the things that are not included in GDP are making the bed at home. What we might call, for women's work, what people do at home is not counted. Looking after your parents or grandparents is not included in GDP. So I agree with you. Once you start to, using money is a useful tool, but it's not an accurate measure. In a sense, counting by money is a bit like understanding the effect of BHP on octeti. It's similar to understanding the universe or the cosmos by saying, let's have a look at Burwood. Something that we can measure with a ruler, we understand. It's obviously very limited. So that's it. And of course, the most famous of these examples is Bhopal. A very complex story. You know, if we were talking about ethics, I'd go through it in a bit more detail. But of course, there's an economic factor which can be measured within the time that it happened. But if you go to Bhopal now, you can still see the social, economic, and health effects which will continue to be measured. And dollars and cents or rupee is a very poor measure of what happened. You know, it's contested, but it's a very poor measure. If you're going to measure a drink, you get litres. That's it. You know, it's nice and clear. But if you're going to measure the effect of some disaster such as Bhopal or octeti or you name it, then simply getting a calculator and say, well, 20 dead people, 30 people who are injured, 40 people who have got some birth defect equals $10 million. You see? This is, it's not accurate, you see? It's a limited way of doing it. Of course, it feels good because you can write it on a paper, and people, when you write it on a piece of paper or on a spreadsheet, it looks impressive. We have worked out the damage, total damage is $10 million. Okay, we'll pay $10 million. If you read the newspapers in Australia over the last 2 years, you'll see that there was a big Royal Commission into what the churches and institutions have done to people in their care, the abuse. The amount of money that they're handing over to people is minimal. So this is a good point. The critical thinker is not simply satisfied that dollars and cents. Of course, if you're running a business, dollars and cents is a big thing. But it's not the only thing, necessarily. It's not the only thing. Nested systems. Well, we don't want to do that. Systems metaphor. Of course, the ecological metaphor, social, cultural, neurocybernetics to a political metaphor or a mechanical metaphor. So going back here, if you describe a system in terms of these metaphors, the characteristics associated with it, we need somebody to come up with a metaphor of a person. Let's forget about yourself because it's too personal. What's a metaphor for a student doing the IMBA? Give me a metaphor. I feel like I need an assistant today.
No, I don't know if that is a metaphor actually.
Yeah, well, tell us. Don't worry, the competition is not very strong, so whatever you do is the best thing we've got.
Somebody who is able to adapt to the environment, so can they be called a chameleon?
Ah, now we've got one, you see? Chameleon. Chameleon.
Chameleon, yeah.
Sort of like a beautiful flower that's adapting to its environment. One, that's it. See? One. Once we get one, then you start to... Of course, it'll be flooding. You probably go home tonight and said, oh, yeah, I've got all these metaphors. It is a beautiful metaphor. Of course, anything from nature is much better than anything from mechanics. Like a student is like a computer, you know? Please. As soon as you get something, a living system, then you're onto something. A student is like a tree in a beautiful garden, not the Garden of Eden. You know, she was grown. Is a tree that is going to bear fruit. A tree, you see, all of those sort of things. So the flower metaphor is a beautiful, useful metaphor. You know, you write that on your CV. It can be a little chameleon, you know. But of course, the key is to think of something for yourself. Of course, for each of us. And it is difficult, right? I mean, it's not. So I'm not saying, you know, if you can't come up with 3 metaphors by 7 o'clock, then you're going to fail the subject. It is difficult. It's a reflective process. I didn't put it on the exam, so you don't have to know it by the exam. But it's a useful thing to do because effective leaders use metaphors all the time. Once you're aware of it, you start to listen to it. Weak leaders use boring metaphors, which are cliches. Intelligent leaders use specific metaphors, which enliven people. That's what their effect is. You see, they're connecting. As soon as we connect this student with a flower, we say, oh, that's it. It's a thing of beauty. It's got to be looked after. It hasn't got a long lifetime, bad luck, but you see, you've got onto something. You connect with people directly. That's what the back side of this sheet I gave you was all about. Once you say, we are a business and we're going to make money, that is not really a metaphor. And so people, you know, make money. Whereas you say, can't think of it. See, it's difficult. I did tell you it was difficult, didn't I? Once you start to see, this is it. Once you say, instead of, this is what the guy I meant to show you last week, we ran out of time, Ray Anderson. Instead of saying, we are here to make more carpet so we make more money. That's descriptive, it's not metaphoric. Instead of saying, we're a football team trying to win a game. That is a metaphor, but it's a cliche. It's a boring cliche, and the problem with it, I've often tried to work out why do I dislike it so much. The problem is because the time for a football game in Australia is 2 hours. A business doesn't go for 2 hours. A business is a much grander thing. You know, it takes, people I know start business, it takes 5 years before you make money. 10 years before you're turning the business, 20 years, you know. He said that for his business, turning it to sustainability is we are climbing Mount Sustainability. The metaphor is this long, difficult, treacherous journey with 13 faces. See, it's a very rich thing. The mind needs some rich food. we are a team trying to win the game is like McDonald's. You like junk food. You see? You know, I mean, but people like it, sort of, you know, it's... We are climbing a mountain and it's going to take